Hello, everyone. Welcome to Durrett Steak. I have one final extra podcast for this week, and it's to go over what happened at the end of last week regarding the playoff change for college football. So now that instead of a four-team playoff, it'll be a 12-team playoff. The sixth highest-ranked conference champions will get in, and the first four seeds have a bye, and then the higher seeds will host the playoff game on their home field until the Final Four, where then it'll be go on neutral fields. Um, so this is very interesting. Is what it was discussed last year, but then for some reason fell through. But now they apparently got that fixed this time. Um, so for me, there are five takeaways from all this because I've heard from both sides, people who love it, people who hate it, people who are indifferent. And I understand all their points to a degree, but here are my five takeaways. Number one, this provides more urgency during the season. Remember how the NFL added that extra playoff spots where there's seven teams from each conference instead of six teams. Well, last year that created more urgency because San Francisco and Philly and the Saints all kind of in that mix there, and then in the AFC's case, you had the Chargers and Raiders. I mean, Colts all battling out for that last spot, versus if there's only six, then maybe the Saints, want to have been having that urgency in week 17 because they're like, oh, well, we're not going to get in because there's only six spots. Both their seven spots, they had a chance. So in this case, for teams that are kind of like ranked in that, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 range, it gives them the sense of urgency. Like, hey, even though we're ranked 14 right now, we still technically might have a shot to get in, in the playoff, depending on what happens with, college football championship weekends and all that. And then not just urgency from that spot, but then also urgency at the top. Because if you're like 4 or 5, it's like we want that first round bye. We don't want to be fifth. We want to be fourth. So it creates urgency in that regard as well. So therefore, conference championship games in general have more meaning in that regard. But also, again, the week 11, week 12, those type of last weeks of the season have more meaning. The second takeaway is there's more seats at the table. And for me, this has been the big problem. Like I mean, we were down to have Cincinnati, a group of 5 team, finally made the playoffs last year. But as you can see, so many things had to happen for that in order for Cincinnati to fall into place there. They had to face a top 5 team and beat them on the road in order to get in, basically. But this creates more seats at the table because obviously, sixth highest champions means automatically you're going to get one G5 team in. And then if it was the case where it's like 2020, then you can potentially get two G5 teams in. Although I think it's going to be most likely one G5 team every year, but at least that's better than nothing. I mean, one G5 team basically gets in the year 6 bowl games every year, so now it's just, one gets in the playoffs every year, which is obviously a big thing for them. And then two, it's like for conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big 12, where I mean they're not getting as many teams in the playoffs normally as they like, especially with 2 SEC teams occupying the playoffs most years. It's like, okay, well then this is a way to get them in every year. And also for those at larges, for example, there's been some times where there's been worthy SEC teams that are just barely out of the picture, but it's like in this case, they can, make it as an at-large. So just more seats at the table, especially since the Big Ten and the SEC are like so popular now and all that. Um, and they're gonna, be better conferences. Therefore, it's like they're gonna get more of the at-large. They're gonna get a lot more of the at-large bids. So therefore, it's very important for, like I said, Pac-12, Big 12, and all that to get those seats at the table automatically, and then they can even get at large if need be. The third takeaway, I mentioned this earlier, but the December Saturdays are now filled with good games. And I'm not necessarily talking about just the conference change games that are played at the beginning of December, but you know how there's like a week or two where there's no football. I guess besides the Navy and Army game, there's no weeks of football, college football, and then you get the lower bowls until finally at the very end of December you get the big bowls. So while the lower bowls can still be going on, then there's nothing wrong with them. I like watching the lower bowls, even though they're not as great, as the better bowls. But it's like now during those weeks, Saturdays off, there's nothingness. It's like now you're going to get some good playoff games during that run. And then there's the people who are like, oh, well, that's just too many games. It's like, well, then here's an AAF versus your FCS team or a very, very, very bad G5 team. Don't play your starters at all. You should be able to win that game without all your starters if you're a good program that's playoff worthy. And if that's the case, the committee, will see that. And if, let's say, you beat an FCS team 28-0 instead of 55-0 because you played your backups, all your backups, the committee will understand that. So therefore, you can get some rest there. And then also, again, if you have a bye, then you're going to get rest there. And then the big thing is that if you're in the playoffs, yeah, it's more games, but like you're not complaining because you're in the playoffs. That's the whole goal of playing through the season is to go to the playoffs and have a chance to win the game. Yeah, there's a little more games, but the NFL can handle 17 weeks. College athletes who are preparing to go to NFL should be handling a similar amount of games. Now, the one good argument you can make is that, hey, that's during finals week for a lot of schools, so it's going to be very hard to prepare for a playoff game and then have finals at the same time. So I do understand on that guard. But they're making it work that the whole season anyways with all these, quizzes and testing classes. They can make it work with finals as well. Okay, fourth takeaway. The recruiting numbers could change to a degree here. And what I mean by that is that all the good recruits, are going to Bama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, because they're like, okay, that's Oklahoma, that's where we can make the playoffs. Well, it's like, okay, now those recruits, it's like, okay, now we can go to, a Penn State and make the playoffs. Now we can go to a Baylor and make the playoffs, instead of just, it's not just winning the Big 12 and making a New Year's Six. Okay, it's like now we can be in the playoffs. Therefore, we can tell a recruit, hey, you don't have to go to Alabama to make the playoffs. You don't have to go to Georgia to make the playoffs. You can make it here now as well. So it helps in that aspect. I mean, that's what I believe. Now, this leads me to my next point. The top teams, Alabama, Georgia, etc., they're still most likely going to win the title every year. So I'm not naive thinking just because that recruiting numbers and more 5 stars, 4 stars can be spread out to other schools. I mean, coaching still matters and stuff like that. So I feel like in the end, Alabama, Georgia, they're still most likely going to win the championships. But hey, even though we have the whole March Madness tournament that's very awesome and everyone loves, including me, it's like in the end, most of the time, 1 seeds, 2 seeds, 3 seeds are gonna win that tournament. For example, Kansas, was a 1 seed this past year. They won the championship. So that's still gonna happen. But at least the road to getting there provides more excitement, more parity, and all that stuff, and just makes it college football much more better. And now the platform I can start to compare to like college basketball and the excitement there where all those lower seeds get upsets at the very beginning before everything kind of shakes out in the end there. So those are kind of my thoughts on the 5 takeaways from the college football platform. Again, to repeat: 1, more urgency during the season; 2, more seats at the table, especially for like the G5; 3, December Saturdays are now filled with better games; 4, the recruiting numbers could change to a degree, make it more fair for the other schools to spread the wealth and get more 5 stars, 4 stars. And then lastly, again, the favorites, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, are still most likely to be the favorites to win it all. But at least, again, the road to getting there is different. And then on a year where, hey, Alabama and Georgia are all kind of, on the same level as everyone else, then, man, that makes it even more exciting with the 12-team playoffs. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for my podcast today. Please subscribe to my channel to learn about me. Thank you very much, and hopefully you have a wonderful weekend of football.